Hello and welcome back. A few weeks ago, Adobe released the 2025 version of Photoshop, Lightroom and Camera RAW. And if you blinked, you may have missed it because there's not a lot new in these versions. We've become used to the major upgrades every year with Adobe, but this year there's not a lot of improvement, and Adobe seems to be pushing people down the path of using AI to generate whole images, which is not photography. It's some sort of graphic art, but it's not photography. So in this video, we'll be just concentrating on the improvements to the photographic techniques, and we won't look at any of these completely AI generated images because that's no longer photography. So let's dive in. So the first claim enhancement in Photoshop is that the remove tool has been improved, and the remove tool is found here in the left hand toolbar. If you click and hold on that toolbar, you've got a number of different tools. We're talking about the remove tool here, and now you've got this option here to find distractions, wires and cables or people. Now because it takes a little bit of time to process, I've already done this. So the first thing I did was I wanted to get rid of these cranes and these cables, so I painted on with the remove tool, which is just done essentially by taking the tool, getting our brush, making it a little bit larger than this, and let's say we just paint on the areas we want to remove, and it in theory should remove it for us, and then we can just hit on the OK or the tick option on the top toolbar and it will work through and generate that. Now I'm not going to do it now because it takes just a little while to work, and this is what it ended up with. Well, we'll just actually undo that, and this is what it did when I painted on. So it sort of removed them, but it generated some weird looking foliage there too. So I'd say that that's barely usable. The second option was I used the option find distractions, wires and cables, and let it do that. I won't do that selection now, it just automatically selects them, and yes, we've had a little bit of a failure here because it found some of the things but not the others. So at this point I would say that this remove tool is no better than it was. But let's try a different example. I had to dig around and find something that had some wires and cables in it, so I found this one of an orangutan climbing on some cables at the Sydney Zoo. And so I just said then, remove tool, find distractions, wires and cables, and it went away and thought about it and thought about it and thought about it for a while. And I'll cancel out of that again because it does take a little bit of time, and you don't want to be sitting there watching the progress bar on the screen. And this is what it came up with, which is sort of okay. You can still see the sort of the ghost of the cables there, so I don't know why it hasn't quite managed to actually remove that completely, but it's done a reasonable job there. It's lost a little bit of the orangutans. It hasn't been able to build in the rest of the leg there, but it's done an okay job there, so not so bad, this one. He looks like he's hovering in midair, so we better put him back on his ropes. So far this remove tool with its AI, find distractions, I'm not finding that that's a great improvement. So let's now have a look at the other one. This is an example I used before on how to use the select subject or select areas and do a generative fill. I've done a number of different options here. I firstly looked at this and I said, go in and find the wires, remove these wires that were here. I thought, well, let's see if that can do it. That's what it came up with. It sort of did a reasonable job there. Got rid of the wires, but sort of left a funny mark. And also this little girl grew an extra piece on her arm, so that's not so great. So yeah, a fail on that one. So then I did the area where I did the generative fill, and what I did was I just painted on all of these people and allowed it to go and do its thing. So let's just have a look at what it came up with, and it did a pretty good job, but that's what I did previously, and I found that that worked really well. So let's have a look and see what had happened when I did the remove tool and just brush them on. Yes, not quite so great. We've sort of got rid of the people. Sorry, I'll turn that bit off. We got rid of the people down here, but it sort of made a bit of a mush of this corner. It's a little bit obvious, and then we've ended up with sort of a disembodied part there of that lady. Didn't get rid of her. Did get sort of rid of the rest of it, but yeah, added another bit of cable in there, which I didn't really want. And then there's a remnant of someone there too, so not so great. And then the last option I did was find distractions, find people, and let it do its thing. And let's see what happened. Well, it removed most of the people except for these people over here, and something very strange happened there. Sort of got a little bit of a black blob there. So at this stage, this improvements for the remove tool, I don't think that that's worth using. It's not something that I think is going to be helpful. This is the version I made using the selection and the generative tool. I firstly cloned out the fence, which was quite simple, and then I did the selection of the people and did the generative fill, and it worked a lot better. So at this point, I'd say that the remove tool improvements are pretty much non-existent. In some cases it might work, but otherwise it's a bit of a non-event. So the second thing that's supposed to be improved is the generative fill option, and I've used this previously. Let's give it a bit of a go here. I used it to remove the people. We'll just quickly brush on using the lasso tool, and this doesn't have to be super accurate, but let's just draw around all of these people and see what it comes up with. You can see here that this is a very rough selection. I've done a very poor job, but now I can go back in and extend that, fill in that leg, and fill in the rest of this lady's jacket. And have we got everyone else in here? No, I've got a bit of a funny bit there, but I've generally selected everyone. So I want to remove them, so we'll go into the generative fill. We don't use a prompt. We just hit generate, and it will go away and see if it can come up with some options. Now this new version is supposed to give us 3 options as previously, but this time the 3 options will be a little more varied, so that in some instances previously you got 3 options and there was virtually no difference between them. This time they're supposed to give us 3 different options. Now this option, the first one, done a very good job. The second option, a slightly different version here. Let's just go back to the first one. There's a little bit of a difference here in the way it's constructed the path, or the edge of the path. And the third one, actually I think the third one's the better one. So that's an improvement. It's not that different from what we've had previously, but we also now have a little option in the top of this. You'll see here in the option, you'll see a little square. If we click on that, that is then supposed to improve the resolution or the detail in that selection. Now, if the selection's too small, it won't do anything, but if you've got a large enough selection, it will in theory give us a better deal, a better option. So it's looking sort of okay. There's the original, there's the option. You'll see that when we zoom in a little bit tighter, the couple of options we came up with, they are a little bit soft. But if I look at my enhanced detail one, well, it's supposed to be a bit better detail. I think it possibly is. It's probably okay. So I think in this instance, using the generative fill and the remove tool like this, we can in fact get a slightly better result. So on this option, I think we'll give this a pass. It's an improvement. Now there are a couple of other enhancements that are allegedly improved in Photoshop, and they relate mainly to removing backgrounds or creating entirely new backgrounds. And as I said previously, if it's not a photographic process, if you're not using a photograph, it's no longer a photograph. So we're not going to investigate those. But one other option that we did have, and that is if we go back up to the top here and we look at the crop tool, and we want to just say expand that option a little bit more. Let's just drag that up. Say, for instance, I wanted to fill in a little bit more there. I can do that, generative expand, and let's see what it does. It is supposed to be an improvement. I haven't actually found this. I better click on generate, otherwise nothing will happen. And it should be able to add a little bit more sky in there. Now, obviously, when we're talking about sky and clouds, there's not a lot of detail, but it'll be interesting to see what it does here, because overall, I've increased the resolution of the image quite a bit, and generally the enhancement or the generated fill is of a lower resolution. So let's have a look. Well, that first option is pretty poor because I can see everything around the edges. Let's have a look at the second one. No. Third one. No. Well, I think what we would do with that is we will give that a fail. Let's just move that up to the very top. In this case, after I've moved it up above all my adjustments, I think I'll have to take those words back. It has improved it, or has created a little bit of extra sky. Let's just turn that off entirely. So it's done something a little bit weird here with the area on top of this building. I'm not liking that at all. Or that, and you can see that the resolution is very poor. So the generative expand, I think I wouldn't use it like that. I would just, if I really wanted to, I could expand my canvas. Let's just get rid of that altogether. That's pretty horrific. What I would do is I would just then do it in slight increments, and just, even though it's going to take a little more time, I would just generate a small amount at a time. That means that you're not using more than 1000 by 1000 pixels, and so the resolution should remain pretty good. And because I'm working on the sky, it's going to be fairly low res anyway. It's not going to be a problem. So let's just have a look and see what that's done. Yes, you can see that that's done quite a reasonable job. Let's just see what happens if I move just close to this little piece on top of the building. Let's just generative fill, generate a little bit more there, and see if that leaves that alone. But certainly just using that generative expand, it seemed to distort some of the existing parts of the photograph, and I'm not a fan of that. Let's see what happens. Yes, now that certainly made an improvement. Let's have a look and see what happens if I just use this same technique down here, just on a smallish part of this area. Now, this can be a little bit tedious if you're expanding the whole area, but if the result is worth it, then it's worth spending just a little bit more time doing it this way rather than the other way, which just seems to be pretty poor. Adobe's touting all of this as being the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I've found really it's not so great. Here we've got the expanded buildings. Let's have a look. That one's a bit wonky. That one's even more wonky. That one's maybe sort of kind of maybe believable. Let's just turn that off. We're asking it to do a lot, to be fair. And so, yeah, I think that that's going to be a marginal improvement. Certainly if you need just a little bit more area of sky or something like grass, this will work fine. But when it comes to adding in detail such as this, it's really not going to do the job. So out of the three things we've looked at so far, we've got a pass on one and a fail on two. Now the next feature we're going to have a quick look at is a new feature that's only available in Camera RAW. Normally Lightroom and Camera RAW are in lockstep with the improvements and enhancements, but in this case Camera RAW has a feature that Lightroom doesn't, and what it is, it's related to the profiles. Now you may never have tried different profiles, but if you look at your basic section of the develop panel, if you see here Adobe Color, you can look at a number of different options. I'm not going to change this now, but if you do pick one of the different profiles, it's giving you a different starting off point to do your processing. We'll take it back to Adobe Color because we're going to open this same file in Photoshop and have a look at this new adaptive preset. So here we are with all those messy images. We'll come back here, we'll go back and open that RAW file, and of course when we go to open a RAW file from Photoshop, it opens in Camera RAW. And here we have it. So essentially all of these adjustments are going to be the same. You'll see here there's no adjustments being made to the image, but we now have under Profile, we have a new option, and that is Adobe Adaptive. And if we have a close look at the image, when I click on the Adaptive preset, it's made some basic changes to the image that are already quite an improvement. And then we can proceed to do our other adjustments and take it into Photoshop. But to make sure that you can see that adaptive preset, you need to go up in Camera RAW up to the little gear icon here. Click on that and look at the technology previews and make sure this new AI feature and settings panel is ticked. Otherwise you won't be able to see it. So that's a new feature that has some improvements and maybe uses some adaptive presets, and I'm sure that that will come to Lightroom in due course. So that's another plus. And while we're looking at Camera RAW, there's another new feature allegedly in Camera RAW that allows us to look at the denoise and without having to produce a DNG file afterwards. I've tried to run this on my machine, but it just takes forever to process, and in my previous experience the Lightroom and Camera RAW denoising is nowhere near as good as the Topaz version. So I will reserve judgment for a later time, but at this point I doubt whether it's going to be as good as the third-party plugin. So that's pretty much it for Camera RAW. Let's have a look at the enhancements in Lightroom. So finally, coming back to Camera RAW and Lightroom, there are some common features that have been changed, one of which is the remove tool. There's been an improvement in the AI features. Now, this is the similar image I was looking at previously, and if we look at this building here and we go to the remove tool, we now have the option of using generative AI to remove it. Now, I'll just remove this. I mean, I wouldn't normally remove it because it's an important part of the photo, so we just need to basically fill it in and let the generative AI do its thing, and it will do a reasonable job. Like all of the new AI tools, in most cases it does a reasonable job. In some cases it does a terrible job, and other cases it's just hopeless. Now you can see here that, for instance, the resolution is no longer what it was. Now if I just turn this off, there's the building. Now it's gone, but you can see what it's generated is actually quite soft. So even though we're using generative AI, we can play around with other options. We generally get 3 options, but again, they're all still a bit soft. So again, limited use for some of these features. I wouldn't be rushing out and getting too excited about it. I think there are better ways to do it. The Photoshop version will actually do a better job, in my opinion. We do have a couple of other options. Now let's just go back and remove that, because that's just pretty awful, and close that out. So they're touting these AI tools as being improved, but I've found that so far in the use I've made, they're a little bit better perhaps, but still not perfect by any means. We do have now a couple of options when we go to export an image, and we come down to, let's go back to our library, and we want to export it. There's a new feature built in, which again is not foolproof. Let's just pop that up here. We can look at a couple of options here. We've now got content credentials possible for the export of the file. Now this is in theory a way to prove the authenticity of your photographs, but as yet it's not been proved to be foolproof, so I wouldn't get too excited about that. If you're a commercial photographer, it may be of some use to you, but I don't think at this point it's anything to get really excited about. We do have some other presets over here in the develop module. We don't get to have that adaptive preset that we got in Camera RAW for some reason, but we do have some adaptive ones here. I've played around with a lot of them. They don't seem to do a whole lot of different things that I'm excited about. I mean, you look at these, they're pretty terrible. I think they're all a bit overdone, so I think I would steer clear of those at this point. And let's go back to where we were and go back to history and come back to where we came in. So not a lot of changes, a few little enhancements, a couple of things that really don't work any better than they used to. And particularly when we come down to things like doing the denoise, if we're going into Lightroom to come into the detail panel, you still have to create a D&G using their denoise. I don't really see why that has to happen. And in my experience, as I said, it's not as good as the Topaz version, but if this is the only denoise you're going to use, then I guess you have to persevere with it. So there we have it, a short rundown of some of the new features in Photoshop, Lightroom and Camera RAW. Nothing to get terribly excited about, but hopefully further down the track there'll be some more enhancements. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.